Hey everyone, welcome to this video tutorial series on post-processing scanned organs using Blender. In these videos, I will show you the basics of Blender, as well as strategies to enhance the scans we obtained from the plastinated organs that were donated to the Modern Human Anatomy program here at CU Anschutz. We will also look at how to prepare pictures of the organs, as well as export and upload these models to Sketchfab. Today's video will look at modifying the organs in Blender, so that they more accurately represent the plastinated organs that were scanned. As a disclaimer, I am not a professional Blender artist. I started learning Blender for this project and wanted to make these videos so you don't have to spend hours scouring the internet to learn the basics like I did. With that, let's dive in. Before you begin, make sure that you have a computer that is capable of running Blender, as well as a mouse. That'll make things a lot easier to navigate once you're in the application. First step is to download Blender. You can do that by going to this site and hitting this download link. Follow the installation instructions in the download, and you should get an icon on your screen that looks like this. Open it, and you'll see this box appear here. Click outside, and that will give us this view here. Every time you open Blender, it will always open with a box. Select the box with the left mouse button and then click delete. Next, we will need to import our object into the workspace. We will be using the liver which was scanned using the Polycam iPhone app. To do this, we will go to File, Import, and then whichever object file you're using. The one we saved was an FBX, but it's also common to save it as an object. Going to select this, go to the Downloads, the liver FBX file, and import the FBX. At this point, it's a good idea to save your project. Do that by going to File, Save As, and I'll save mine as liver tutorial. When we return to the screen, you might notice that we're not able to see the liver. This is because it's too small. To scale it up, we can use the shortcut by holding S, and then move our mouse away from the center. You might have to repeat this a couple of times in order to make the object visible. Now that we can see our object, let's take a moment to go over some Blender basics. To start, let's learn how to move around in object mode. First, you want to make sure that you've selected your object, and then we can see what mode we're in by clicking this box in the top left corner. You see Object, Edit, and Sculpt mode. We'll also be using texture paint in this tutorial, but that will come later. Now that we're in object mode, we can manipulate our view around the object. We can rotate around the object by clicking and holding the center mouse button. If we want to zoom in, you can scroll in and out. If you want to pan across the view, hold Shift and the center mouse button. If you want to move the object itself, make sure you've selected the button, click the G button, and if you want to move it only along a single axis, make sure it's selected, click the G button for grab, and then whatever axes that you want to move it across. So I'm moving it across the X axis here, the Y axis here, the Z axis here. If you move it somewhere you don't want to, just do Ctrl Z, and then it'll move it back to where you had it before. Likewise, you can rotate the object by clicking the R button. You can move it there or move it around certain axes, depending on how you want to rotate it. We can also change the way that the liver looks. This can be done in two ways. First, in the top right-hand corner, you can see that there are small circles in a row. This will allow us to enter different views that we'll use throughout this video tutorial series. Wireframe will allow us to see all of the individual edges, vertices, and faces of the polygons that compose our object. Solid is the default view without any texturing that allows us to see the object as if it was an STL or a 3D printed image. If you want to see the texture, go to Material Preview. You might notice that this color does not look like our liver at all. If your object doesn't come with the texture automatically applied, we will have to fix that. To do so, go to your navigation bar over at the right and select the Textures properties. Select New, click Open, and I saved this in the liver object file, so I'll click on this open image, and then this allows us to come over to the material tab. Under the base color, we'll select this, select image texture, open. We're going to open that same textured image. We now have a fully colored liver. Unfortunately, we can see here that there is still this string that we used to suspend the liver. To get rid of that fishing line, there's a couple of things we need to do. First, let's start by going back to the solid view. As you can see, there is still a line running down the liver. Let's fix that by changing modes. To do so, make sure that your object is selected and go to the top left and select Sculpt mode. This will allow us to work on the object as if it was made of a clay-like material. Along the left side, you have a toolbar with different ways to manipulate your object. We will be using many of these to come. First, we will be using the scrape tool. After you select this tool, we can make some modifications to the tool itself. We can change the radius either by going along the top bar and changing the radius and the strength up here, or the shortcut for that is holding F, and that will change, just holding F will change the size, and if you hold Shift F, that will change the strength. Run this along where the fishing line was to get rid of that crease. While we are in sculpt mode, let's make some other corrections. I'm going to zoom in to an area where there's not as much detail. If we press Z, that allows us to quickly go to the Material Preview tab, and here we can tell that maybe this is trying to be some kind of artery. We want to increase the definition and make this artery stand out more, so we're going to go to the Crease tool, switch back to solid mode so that we can see the changes that we're making. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, and then you can see when I do this it makes a crease, but it's not very smooth, and you can see that even some of the individual polygons here. This can happen if while we were scanning there was not that much light or not that many pictures taken. Let's switch from sculpt mode to edit mode. Edit mode shows us all the vertices, which are individual points, edges, and faces, which are made up of the edges and vertices. We then want to choose a cursor that best fits the job to select the vertices. The default is a box select, but we can change that by hitting the W key, which changes the cursor type. This allows us to select a circle, or a loop, or a tweak that allows us to actually modify individual vertices, but we won't be using that one in this tutorial. I'm going to choose the circle for this. Then let's left click to select the areas that you want to highlight. If you accidentally get something that you didn't mean to, you can press Ctrl and deselect those areas. If you want to select another area, or if you accidentally released the left click button, then you can hold Shift and you can continue selecting. Otherwise, you'll get rid of all the areas that you had selected. If this happens, you can just press Ctrl Z and it will reselect all of the points that you had previously selected. Once you have selected the area you want, you can then right click and subdivide. This will split all the faces up, allowing for a smoother transition when working with tools. There are more things we can do in edit mode, but we will come back to that later. Now that we have more faces, we can have a smoother crease when we go back to the sculpt mode. We can continue smoothing this out and increasing the definition of this artery so that it stands out. Next, we will take a look at adding impressions to areas where there should be holes. To do this, first, let's switch back to the edit mode. If you want to quickly switch between modes, click Tab. I'm going to rotate around, and this is the area that I'm going to want to start working on here, which I assume is the hepatic portal vein. I can select it like we did before, but as you can see, I would have to rotate all the way around, and that could take quite a bit to highlight all of that area. Alternatively, what I can do is switch to the wireframe view. And now that we have this here, any of the areas that we select with our tool will pass through and it will highlight the other side as well. And this can be handy if you're trying to highlight a very large area. Now I will right click and click subdivide. If I wanted it especially subdivided, I could now go to the bottom left of the screen and increase the amount of times it subdivides by increasing the number of cuts. Next, we can modify the vein in sculpt mode. I'm going to change that back to solid state, and we want to start masking the area that we don't want to affect, which is the center of this vein. To do this, we can go to the sidebar and click mask. Then highlight the areas that you don't want to be affected by the tools. With that selected, we can then use the grab tool. With this tool, pulling on the edges will elongate it and make it more pronounced. Once that is done, we can make the hole inside deeper. To do this, we will invert the mask by clicking A and then select Invert Mask. This will prevent the rest of the liver from being affected. Then we can use the grab tool to push the hole in deeper. To clear the mask, click Alt-M. Let's see how the liver is looking when we apply the texture. Once again, you can click Z to go to the material preview mode, and we will see how the liver looks with the texture applied. When we're deciding between different views, we can choose between the material preview view and the rendered view. The difference is that the rendered view also incorporates the environment and lights on the rendered image, whereas material preview only shows the texture. For example, in the rendered, we have a light source over here that's casting light, which also results in a shadow. In the material preview mode, we don't have that light source casting a shadow. Moving back to the vein, there is more we can do to make the vein look deep by switching to texture paint mode. Here we can use brushes to paint our object. First, let's make this darker by making the primary color black, and then let's color in the middle of the vein. That's starting to look more like a vein. While we are in texture paint, we can fix some of the areas, like this fishing line. To do so, we're going to go to the clone tool, and then we're going to hit Shift and right click. So this is going to copy this texture right here, and where we selected the cursor will set the origin point for which the image texture is referenced. For example, if I come here and I click left click along this, that will start making this area appear like the area in reference to where I had initially selected this cursor. Okay, so we can do that just to kind of smooth out this area and get rid of the fishing line. In addition, for blurred areas like up here, let's fix that. We'll change that cursor again by Shift and right click, and that will allow us to start changing a little bit of the texture and get rid of that fishing line that we had. We can also fix some of the areas that don't have great resolution by copying well-defined areas that are right next to it. For example, over here, it doesn't look like while we were scanning we had enough light or that we took enough pictures. So similarly, I'm going to hold Shift, right click, and then we can color this in here to give that more of a textured appearance. Using these tools, you should be able to modify the liver until it appears more suitable for uploading to Sketchfab. For example, I would increase the definition here, and I would also increase the depth of these paddock veins here and here, as well as increasing the definition of any creases. As you do that, that will make the liver appear more lifelike. Here are some additional tips that aren't relevant for the liver, but will help you out in other projects. For example, the heart has a lot of vasculature, but it's not always pronounced on our scans. In order to enhance that, we can use sculpt mode again. For example, let's make a coronary artery. To do so, we're going to first increase the definition of the area by going to edit mode. And let's say we're going to work in this area right here. I'm going to select this area to work with, right click, and subdivide. We can even subdivide that one more time. Now when we make changes, hopefully it's a little bit smoother. Next, we're going to switch into sculpt mode, and then we're going to do clay strips. I want this artery to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to click F, decrease the size of my tool. I also want it to be rather pronounced, so I'm also going to click Shift F to increase the size. Now when I do this, we can see that it's starting to build up, be some kind of artery-ish shape. You can notice up here when I started doing that area up here was the area that was not included in that box, and so it appears less smooth. You can pass over this a certain amount of times to increase the appearance of that artery, but we can also go back and use our old friend the crease tool just right around there, just around these edges, to make it a little bit more pronounced there as well. And then you can see that we have the start of what appears to be, could be like some kind of vasculature going around over here. This is particularly useful when trying to enhance small vessels that are pre-existing on the heart. When you are finished, it should look something like this. That is the end of this video tutorial. Thank you for watching if you've made it to this point, and we'll see you in future videos. Thanks, and have a great day.